Today, we're going to be talking all about the true cost of college. I'm excited to be joined by Kathy Anderson. Kathy is the Associate Vice President of Student Financial Services at the Berklee College of Music. And Kathy's going to be leading us through the conversation today. So Kathy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for asking me. This will be a really important topic, and I'm glad to be able to help you.
Absolutely. So Kathy, before we get started, would you mind telling our viewers a little bit about Berklee College of Music and maybe one or two fun facts that for folks that don't know or maybe already know about the college that they might not know?
Sure. Berklee College of Music is 75 years old this year. We are located in the heart of Boston. We have multiple campuses, though. We have a campus in Valencia, Spain. We have the Boston Conservatory is now part of Berklee. We have a very big online division for music. And we just opened a campus in New York City for graduate studies. Berklee is one of the top music schools in the country and enrolls about 5,000 students annually, maybe actually closer to 6 when you count the graduate population. So good sized college. You wouldn't know it by walking by us, but we are a big school and there's music in every hallway in this building.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And yeah, I certainly a lot of folks know about Berklee, but that's great to hear about some of the additional campuses opening, and certainly the one in New York City. That's really cool. So today we're talking all about the true cost of college. And Kathy, as someone who's worked in the field of college planning and financing your entire career, I know that you've had many conversations with families about college costs. For individuals just starting out, I think there can be some confusion when it comes to really kind of grasping the true cost of what college might cost. And I think one of the particular tricky aspects can be the difference between the college sticker or the published price versus the net price, which is what many families end up paying, and in many cases, less than the sticker price. So I think a good place to start is, can you talk a little bit about both the sticker price of colleges and the net price, and why is it important for families to know both when they're making their decision?
Sure. That is probably the question I get asked the most. I just did the math, and I've been doing higher ed financing. This is the end of my 29th year. So been doing this a long time. And that's the number one question is, how do I know how much college will cost me and my family? And it really is an individual discussion. It's not a one size fits all answer. Somebody may get a scholarship, somebody may not. So the true cost of college is that you'll see a published price, a cost of attendance, which is a comprehensive figure. It includes tuition and all the other things it takes to be a student, like room and board, books, etc. And then there's what's called the net price, which is the price the family will pay after any college-based, and I mean, this is funding from the college itself, grants or scholarships are applied toward the cost of tuition. So you may see one price that's on the website, and then once your aid has been calculated, or if a family's aid has been calculated, what's left over is what we call the net price to the student and the family.
So Kathy, and I think that distinction is very important, right? And so when it comes to making comparisons, certainly the family should be looking at that net price versus that sticker price. Mm-hmm. But I guess, one of the questions that I'm sure you've gotten many times and we've gotten, so there is that published price, that sticker price, and then there's a net price, and it's offset by, as you mentioned, the scholarships that come from the College or University of Financial Aid. In the biz, it's called discounting, right? And so can you talk a little bit about discounting, why it happens, and really kind of what's the philosophy behind that for college and universities?
Absolutely. So discounting is the lingo that we use internally to talk about how much funding we put out on the street for students. And it can come in multiple ways. I've worked at a number of different colleges throughout my career, and I've seen it done in different ways. At the heart of it all, tuition discounting is what a college does to attract and retain students to their campus, right? So it varies greatly by institution. My prior employer we did both what's called merit-based discounting, where you'd get a scholarship for SAT scores, grades, extracurricular activities, et cetera. And then there was occasionally a need-based component on top of that, where we look at the family's income, combine the grants and scholarships together, and that was the discount. Schools do it in all kinds of different ways, depending on how they wish to shape their class. So at Berklee, we do our scholarships based on the student's audition, which really is, kind of makes sense because we're
right.
performing arts, right?
Right.
Other schools, though, will look at, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say formulaic, but it is, right? You SAT scores, GPA, certain leadership things you've done will net you X scholarship. And it really does vary greatly by school. It's kind of hard to say how we would compare to another institution, because our way of putting our tuition discounts together, grants and scholarships to students, is very different than one of our competing colleges, the way they might do it. So it does make it a little bit challenging for families to try and do an apples to apples comparison. I would say probably the best place to find out what a college might cost you is through the institution's net price calculator. All colleges are required to have one of these. At a place like Berklee, it's very tough to know what your actual net price will be until your audition has gone through. But at other institutions that don't rely on auditions, families can generally get a pretty good idea of what their out-of-pocket will be by entering in some basic information into the institution's net price calculator.
And I'm glad you brought up net price calculator, because, we certainly try to encourage families to utilize that as much as possible. I think it's important also to mention that depending on the institution, as you said, it might be a little more difficult to get a true personal value of what you might get, right? It's a tool, not a guarantee.
That's exactly right. Right. And so it is only as good as the information that you put in and the information that you can put in. So, for example, I know that I have a 15-year-old, and when we were starting to kind of play around just to see what net price calculators would look like for us, they're asking for things like SAT scores and GPAs. Really tough to do that when your child is 5. So I could put in what we could put in, and then we got some basic ideas of what we might qualify for. Now that he's 15, I do have some better benchmarks. I have a GPA for him. I have a PSAT score. And so I could start now, as he's a sophomore, I could start going to different college websites and plugging in our information and getting an idea of what the college might cost us when all is said and done. Yeah, so it's a really important tool, but it is going to get more accurate as you have more data points to put into it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. And to your point too, as families are getting closer to that hopefully is when they're utilizing the tool more often, and really trying to get more of that apples to apples comparison. So net price calculator, definitely something that families, as you're kind of working through, trying to understand the true cost of college, will be good to kind of get an estimate. But really, I think the rubber meets the road where you then get that financial aid award letter. And so we have an entire video dedicated to reading and understanding the financial aid award letter. And you mentioned earlier about kind of the differences between merit-based scholarship and need-based scholarship, and how schools are using that for discounting. So we have a full video on that, so we won't have to go too deep in, but when that family gets that award letter, because it's all connected, right, with understanding that true cost of college,
right,
what should they look for on that award letter that will help them identify, okay, if I've got 3 colleges and I've got 3 different award letters, does it say the net price at the end? Do you have to figure it out? Kind of how does all that work with the award letter?
That, again, varies by college, right? So
Mhm.
we're moving toward having common or standardized award letters. And I feel, and in the industry, we've really shifted to make sure that it is much easier to get an accurate comparison between institutions. But what you should see is cost of attendance, which is the comprehensive figure. It's much more than tuition. So cost of attendance, you generally see the aid broken into 3 types of categories. One would be grants and scholarships. That's the first piece. The way we do it is that we subtract your grants and scholarships from your cost of attendance, and we show you a net price, subtracting those things. And then we show you what other aid might be available to assist you. So student loans, maybe the family takes them, maybe they don't. If they've got savings or another means to pay that, then they may not take the student loans. And then usually at the bottom, there's links to even more resources like a Parent Plus loan, bank-based, what we call alternative or private loans. Those would show up toward the bottom of the letter, and those can be used to decrease the out-of-pocket expenses. So that's generally what you'll see. You'll want to see what the grants and scholarships are first, then decide if loans are next, if you need those for the student, and then the very last bucket would be additional family type loans. Yeah.
No, that's great. And so for some families, depending on the institution, as you mentioned, moving towards more of a standardization, but there may be a little bit of legwork that they have to do in order to get to that net price.
Yeah. So again, having done this for so long, I've seen a lot of different award letters. I sound like a senior citizen. A lot of different award letters where, sometimes it's not obvious what the aid type is, right? It might not be obvious that some schools have their own loan programs. So an institutional loan might not be apparent. It may look like a discount. So you may want to, a lot of times you'll get a guide that goes along with the award letter that explains the terminology. And if it isn't clear, then the next step would be just to connect with the financial aid department at that school to get somebody to walk you through what you're seeing. Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, connecting with the financial aid office, reaching out. We're always talking about, just if you have questions, reach out, especially sooner rather than later, and especially before you're making any true decisions if you have further questions.
Absolutely. And generally award letters are timed to come well before the deposit is due. Gives families usually at least a month, assuming all the paperwork is in, but it gives families at least a month to ask the questions, to do the math, to decide if this is sustainable, not just for 1 year, but for really the entire duration of the program. One of the things we stress with our families is, this is not just a 1 year. This is not 1 year. You have to think, can I swing this for all 3 or 4 years, depending on the length of the program? If it's a 2-year program, is that feasible? So if you have questions, the best place to go is the aid office of that specific institution.
Perfect. Excellent. So we talked a lot about today, sticker versus net price, kind of going through and understanding the difference. We got into a little bit about discounting and the philosophy of why schools do this. We talked about the net price calculator, which is really great tool to utilize, a little bit about the award letter, and really kind of all these tools together and understanding all these terms help you make that apples to apples comparison, help you understand what your true cost of college will be. So Kathy, before we go, final question for you. For those just starting the college search process and starting to build their list, any words of advice or tips for approaching how they build a well-rounded college list based on cost, right? So we know a lot of families, obviously academics and admissions are very important, but when you're looking at that cost element, how do you work that into the building of your list?
So I would say that you will look at both the admission criteria and also the financial aid criteria that you can see. You can see generally information is out there about, what percentage of the class got scholarships, how much scholarship dollars they got, grant dollars, what the average out-of-pocket cost was per family, and look at I guess, look at the full cost of attendance to see, assuming no assistance, is this
Right.
feasible for the family? Is it, maybe you're looking at adding a state school or two into the mix. Maybe there's a community college that is a good place to start. I know that was something that a lot of students looked at as a way to save some money. I talked with a young man considering coming to Berklee next year. He lives close enough that he's thinking he might want to commute to save some housing costs, right? So are there ways that you can look at that cost of attendance, things that maybe you can cover either out of pocket or in full if you get no assistance from the institution? And then that's where I would start with my financially safe list. The other piece of this, though, is don't eliminate institutions just because of a high, what you perceive to be a high sticker price, because often those institutions do have funding that can help drop the price for you. So, something that's financially safe, and then keep exploring to see what actually could be in the realm of possibility.
That's excellent. And I think that's a really good point to end on, making sure that you're not eliminating based on sticker price alone, because we know that many schools are offering substantial discounts, and if you're kind of fitting into those enrollment goals of the institution. So Kathy, I want to thank you once again for serving as our expert today on the true cost of college. Once again, this video is brought to you by Private College 529 Plan, which is a prepaid tuition plan that allows you to lock in the current rate of tuition and mandatory fees at all the participating institutions that participate in the plan, private colleges across the nation. We work with close to 300 private colleges, Berklee College of Music being one of them.